Hello again, folks. Steve Angel here with Simply Traditional. I posted a video last week showing my method for sharpening 2-blade broadheads using diamond stones and the Simply Traditional Strop block. And I got a couple of questions and feedback about, well, how do you sharpen 3-blade heads? And a lot of folks still use 3 blades. I still use 3 blades. I'm a bit partial to 2-blade heads, but I do shoot 3-blade heads. In fact, I'm preparing for a trip to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and these 3-blade heads will be going with me. This is the snuffer broadheads, 150 grain head with a 100 grain steel insert. I will be shooting these out of a 60-pound Northern Mist longbow. The arrow that I'll be shooting this with is actually a 400 spine with a 100 grain insert, and then this 250 grain head. I use the diamond stones predominantly. Mainly, it's an ease of use thing. I don't have to mess with oil. I don't have to do any special treatment. Basically, just use it and either brush it off or wash it off. These I just actually rinsed off under the sink. Arkansas stones work fine. I've got a set of them. I use them from time to time. The biggest headache with the stones is the oil. If you don't use the oil, you ruin the stone. But there's definitely nothing wrong with this. I wouldn't say go out and buy diamond stones if you already have sharpening stones. The method I'm going to show you works just as good. And then I also use the Simply Traditional Strop block to put a final polish on these heads. Regardless of the head that you choose, the first thing you're going to have to do with any head is grind the right bevel on these stones. For that, I use a coarse stone. It takes quite a bit of work, so I'm probably going to show you part of this one side, and then I'll pause the video and get all 3 sides equal before I proceed. The first thing you're going to want to do when you take this out of the package is, I use a Sharpie. You can use any kind of magic marker. I just happen to have a red handy. Typically I'll use black. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to coat the edges all the way up to the point with this marker. And what this will do is it'll show you when you've got a perfect grind from point to back. And that is important. It'll make your heads easier to sharpen in the future, and it'll also keep them sharp through normal use. So basically, I'm going to try to get close enough here where we can get this in frame, if I can see what I'm showing you here. And then we're going to take this marker and we're just going to coat that blade all the way up to the point. Okay? And I'm going to do all 3, and then I'll point it back up to the camera so you can see it. But we're putting a light coating on the metal here, so that as we sharpen, we will see where the most metal needs to be taken off. And typically on these snuffers, it's going to be towards the point to get everything even. So once you have all of the blade edges coated, you're going to take your stone, and again, whichever stone you use, it doesn't really matter. I've still got a little water on here. You're just going to set the blade, the broadhead flat on the grinding surface, and you're going to push forward, or you can go back and forth. In this initial grind, it doesn't really matter. You're just trying to remove as much metal as possible so that you can get this blade consistent from front to back. Now, again, it's going to depend on the blade. I'm not sure if you can see this or not, but we have one area here that's actually still not getting a grind, which means the back and the point are still a little bit high. So we're going to have to continue grinding until we get a shiny surface from back to front. And this will vary from not only from broadhead to broadhead, but even from side to side within this same head. You can turn your block around. As far as how much pressure, I'm putting a lot of pressure right now because I'm trying to take off as much metal as possible to get through this phase as quickly as I can. As you get your head sharper, again, be careful, and you may even want to use some leather gloves just for the sake of safety. Again, direction the manner in which you do this does not matter. It's just about getting this steel filed down to where you need it to be. And we're about there on this side. Now, again, I hope this shows up in the camera, but if you can see this, we've got 0 of the marker left on this blade from back to front, which tells me I've got an even bevel all the way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, and just using a pushing motion, I'm going to make maybe 10 to 15 final passes on this side, and then I'm done with this side of the blade. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video, just because there's no reason in taking up all that time, and I'm going to do these other 3 sides, and I'll come back once we're at a point where we're ready to proceed with the actual sharpening. Okay, gang, this head is now ready to start the sharpening process. And as you can see, if I hold it up here, I think you'll be able to see this. All of the edges are now completely free of the Sharpie that I applied. And it tells me that I've got a good bevel from front to back. This is the most important piece. It's also the most time consuming, and it's the hardest piece. As you can see, I've rolled up my shirt sleeves. I actually started breaking out of sweat. I had one side that required quite a bit more grinding than the others, which is not that unusual. But now you've got a head that should be consistent from a cutting perspective on all 3 blades. So now that you've done that, we've actually made a few passes, only pushing this time, on each side of the blade, just to remove any of the major burrs that we raised during the grinding process. So now we're ready to sharpen. Again, it's hard to tell people how much pressure to use. You'll get used to it. You'll start out with a good amount of pressure on these blades to get them down to a grind. Now once you move to the fine stone, you still want to use more pressure at the start and less pressure as you go through your cycles, but it's really not a lot of pressure. Again, you're not trying to take off large amounts of metal here. You're just trying to put an edge on these blades. So we're going to set the blade flat. I position my hand about in the middle of the blade so that my pressure is consistent from front to back, because I don't want to ruin the grind that I just put on there. So we're going to start, and we're just going to do 10 passes. And once that's done, we're going to rotate the blade 1 notch to the right. And again, we're doing 10 passes. We'll rotate it to the right again. We're going to do 10 more. Now at this point, you shouldn't feel any burr at all on any of these blades. They should actually start getting sharp. So now's when you need to be a little bit more cautious. Again, if you've got some leather gloves or some cut resistant gloves, you may want to use those. Now we're going to rotate the blade again. We're going to cut that in half and go to 5, and we're also going to lighten our pressure. And I think even on the video you'll be able to hear this. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to set that aside there with the last blade that I sharpened, and I'm going to wipe the filings off of my stone here so that I'm getting a good bite for these last few passes. From here, it's pretty much at your discretion. I typically like to go down to 3 next. Again, fairly light pressure. I'm not trying to take off a lot of metal here. And now I'm going to flip to the next one and go down to 2. And now we're going to do a series of 1 stroke, really light pressure on each blade. And you can really do this as much as you want. It's up to you how sharp you want to get your blades. Obviously, the more polished the blade is, the least friction, and technically the sharper the blade is. That being said, I am a firm believer that a sharp filed edge is one of the most lethal edges out there because of the way the wound channel will bleed. But that's an argument for another time, excuse me. So at this point, I should have this blade pretty sharp. I'm putting very little pressure as I glide it across the stone. So now we should be in pretty good shape. Now I'm just going to do a little test here, and I can feel it. I can feel it biting into the hair on my arm. So we're going to stop with this stone, and we're going to move to the strop. Now the only thing about the strop is you change the direction that you're moving the blade. You want to go from front to back instead of pushing. You're pulling now. Again, pressure is completely subjective. I start out fairly hard pressure, and I'll go 10 passes. I think that was 10. But on the stropping, the number of repetitions is not as important as far as keeping it even as it is on the stone, because you're really removing very small amounts of the steel here. Alright, that's 10 per blade. Now I'm going to turn my strop just so that I keep the wear on the leather even, and I'm going to go down to 5 and lighten my pressure. I talked about polishing compounds in the previous video. I'm not going to touch on that again. It's completely a matter of preference. I typically don't use them. Some people do. It's 100% your call. Now I'm going to go to 3. Rotate. Again, at this point, you owe these broadheads a lot of respect, because it's starting to get very sharp now, and you can cut yourself very easily. Remember to be safe until you get very familiar and comfortable with this process. Again, gloves is a good idea. Okay, now I'm going to go to a series of 1 passes. Again, very light pressure. If you listen closely, you can probably hear just the most minor sounds of abrasion here. The leather is just a very, very mild abrasive. It's taken off microscopic amounts of metal from this blade with each pass. And now at this point, and I think you'll even be able to see that these edges are just they're just polished. I mean, you could probably set it up and catch a reflection of them if you were looking at it just right. And from a sharpness perspective, I mean, I'm not sure if you can see this. The hair comes off with no problem. See if you can hear this. I mean, it's shaving hair off. This is hair popping sharp. Again, like I said with the 2-blade series, this is what it takes to consistently bring down game quickly and efficiently with any archer equipment. I am primarily, well, not primarily, I am solely a traditional archer at this point. I don't even hunt with firearms anymore. But whether you're using traditional or compound equipment, you owe it to the game you pursue to get your broadheads as sharp as possible. This is sharp. Out of the package, while I'm not going to argue that they can't take game, they're not what I would call ethically sharp enough to hunt, regardless of the manufacturer. Do yourself a favor, practice, learn how to get your broadheads this sharp, and I promise you'll be more successful in the field. Until next time, again, Steve Angel with Simply Traditional. Hope you enjoy these tips, and if you're successful, please share your success with us on social media or by email. Thanks so much. Have a great day.